Section 52 of Gray's Anatomy, Part 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. Anatomy of the Human Body, Part 2, by Henry Gray. The Muscles and Fascia of the Leg, Part 1. The muscles of the leg may be divided into three groups: anterior, posterior, and lateral. 1. The anterior crural muscles: tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum longus, extensor hallucis longus, peroneus tertius. Deep fascia, fascia cruris. The deep fascia of the leg forms a complete investment to the muscles, and is fused with the periosteum over the subcutaneous surfaces of the bones. It is continuous above with the fascia lata, and is attached around the knee to the patella, the ligamentum patellae, the tuberosity and condyles of the tibia, and the head of the fibula. Behind it forms the popliteal fascia covering in the popliteal fossa. Here it is strengthened by transverse fibers, and perforated by the small saphenous vein. It receives an expansion from the tendon of the biceps femoris laterally, and from the tendons of the sartorius, gracilis, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus medially. In front it blends with the periosteum covering the subcutaneous surface of the tibia, and with that covering the head and malleolus of the fibula. Below it is continuous with the transverse crural and laciniate ligaments. It is thick and dense in the upper and anterior part of the leg, and gives attachment, by its deep surface, to the tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus, but thinner behind, where it covers the gastrocnemius and soleus. It gives off, from its deep surface, on the lateral side of the leg, two strong intermuscular septa, the anterior and posterior peroneal septa, which enclose the peronei longus and brevis, and separate them from the muscles of the anterior and posterior crural regions, and several more slender processes which enclose the individual muscles in each region. A broad transverse intermuscular septum, called the deep transverse fascia of the leg, intervenes between the superficial and deep posterior crural muscles. The tibialis anterior, tibialis anticus, is situated on the lateral side of the tibia. It is thick and fleshy above, tendinous below. It arises from the lateral condyle and upper half, or 2/3 of the lateral surface, of the body of the tibia, from the adjoining part of the interosseous membrane, from the deep surface of the fascia, and from the intermuscular septum between it and the extensor digitorum longus. The fibers run vertically downward, and end in a tendon, which is apparent on the anterior surface of the muscle at the lower third of the leg. After passing through the most medial compartments of the transverse and cruciate crural ligaments, it is inserted into the medial and under surface of the first cuneiform bone, and the base of the first metatarsal bone. This muscle overlaps the anterior tibial vessels and deep peroneal nerve in the upper part of the leg. Variations. A deep portion of the muscle is rarely inserted into the talus, or a tendinous slip may pass to the head of the first metatarsal bone or the base of the first phalanx of the great toe. The tibiofascialis anterior, a small muscle from the lower part of the tibia to the transverse or cruciate crural ligaments, or deep fascia. The extensor hallucis longus, extensor proprius hallucis, is a thin muscle situated between the tibialis anterior and the extensor digitorum longus. It arises from the anterior surface of the fibula for about the middle 2/4 of its extent, medial to the origin of the extensor digitorum longus. It also arises from the interosseous membrane to a similar extent. The anterior tibial vessels and deep peroneal nerve lie between it and the tibialis anterior. The fibers pass downward and end in a tendon, which occupies the anterior border of the muscle, passes through a distinct compartment in the cruciate crural ligament, crosses from the lateral to the medial side of the anterior tibial vessels near the bend of the ankle, and is inserted into the base of the distal phalanx of the great toe. Opposite the metatarso-phalangeal articulation, the tendon gives off a thin prolongation on either side, to cover the surface of the joint. An expansion from the medial side of the tendon is usually inserted into the base of the proximal phalanx. Variations. Occasionally united at its origin with the extensor digitorum longus, extensor ossis metatarsi hallucis, a small muscle, sometimes found as a slip from the extensor hallucis longus, or from the tibialis anterior, or from the extensor digitorum longus, or as a distinct muscle. It traverses the same compartment of the transverse ligament with the extensor hallucis longus. The extensor digitorum longus is a piniform muscle, situated at the lateral part of the front of the leg. It arises from the lateral condyle of the tibia, from the upper 3/4 of the anterior surface of the body of the fibula, from the upper part of the interosseous membrane, from the deep surface of the fascia, and from the intermuscular septa between it and the tibialis anterior on the medial, and the peronei on the lateral side. Between it and the tibialis anterior are the upper portions of the anterior tibial vessels and deep peroneal nerve. The tendon passes under the transverse and cruciate crural ligaments, in company with the peroneus tertius, and divides into 4 slips, which run forward on the dorsum of the foot, and are inserted into the 2nd and 3rd phalanges of the 4 lesser toes. The tendons to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th toes are each joined, opposite the metatarso-phalangeal articulation, on the lateral side by a tendon of the extensor digitorum brevis. The tendons are inserted in the following manner. Each receives a fibrous expansion from the interossei and lumbricalis, and then spreads out into a broad aponeurosis, which covers the dorsal surface of the first phalanx. This aponeurosis, at the articulation of the first with the 2nd phalanx, divides into 3 slips, an intermediate, which is inserted into the base of the 2nd phalanx, and 2 collateral slips, which, after uniting on the dorsal surface of the 2nd phalanx, are continued onward, to be inserted into the base of the 3rd phalanx. Variations. This muscle varies considerably in the modes of origin and the arrangement of its various tendons. The tendons to the 2nd and 5th toes may be found doubled, or extra slips are given off from one or more tendons to their corresponding metatarsal bones, or to the short extensor, or to one of the interosseous muscles. A slip to the great toe from the innermost tendon has been found. The peroneus tertius is a part of the extensor digitorum longus, and might be described as its 5th tendon. The fibers belonging to this tendon arise from the lower third or more of the anterior surface of the fibula, from the lower part of the interosseous membrane, and from an intermuscular septum between it and the peroneus brevis. The tendon, after passing under the transverse and cruciate crural ligaments, in the same canal as the extensor digitorum longus, is inserted into the dorsal surface of the base of the metatarsal bone of the little toe. This muscle is sometimes wanting. Nerves. These muscles are supplied by the 4th and 5th lumbar and 1st sacral nerves through the deep peroneal nerve. Actions. The tibialis anterior and peroneus tertius are the direct flexors of the foot at the ankle joint. The former muscle, when acting in conjunction with the tibialis posterior, raises the medial border of the foot, i.e., inverts the foot, and the latter, acting with the peronei brevis and longus, raises the lateral border of the foot, i.e., everts the foot. The extensor digitorum longus and extensor hallucis longus extend the phalanges of the toes, and, continuing their action, flex the foot upon the leg. Taking their fixed points from below, in the erect posture, all these muscles serve to fix the bones of the leg in the perpendicular position, and give increased strength to the ankle joint. 2. The posterior crural muscles. The muscles of the back of the leg are subdivided into 2 groups, superficial and deep. Those of the superficial group constitute a powerful muscular mass, forming the calf of the leg. Their large size is one of the most characteristic features of the muscular